Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're coming in from. I see folks all over the place in the chat. So drop us a message in there and let us know where you're joining from today. Welcome back to day 2 of Build Week. Yesterday was all about large language models, how to use them, how to compare them, and how to decide which one fits best for what you're trying to do. And back by popular demand, we have Angelique Levoy Torres here again for day 2. And so yesterday we talked about large language models, like we said. The winner of the poll for folks' favorite large language model was GPT-4 as kind of the most used LLM. So thanks for voting there. Today we're going to get all into vectors and RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So we're going to have a bit of a presentation from Angelique, like we mentioned, and then we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A if you have questions about what she's been building, the Retool platform, all that sort of stuff at the end. So today's poll that we're going to share in a little bit is kind of what is your builder mode today? So is it more precision mode, experiment mode? You're just trying to figure out what's going on, speed run mode, or are you just straight vibing? So you'll see that come up in Zoom here in just a little bit. And also in the chat very shortly, we'll be dropping a link to our community thread for today. So that's where the replay for this video will be available. We'll also post all of the questions that everyone has there along with the answers. And if you have any questions that you thought of after we logged off here today, or just didn't want to ask live in the chat or in Zoom Q&A, we'll be able to answer those for you in that community thread as well. So I'm excited to introduce Angelique and see what she has to show us today. And let's dive in. Day 2 of Build Week. Hi, Angelique.
Hi everybody. So happy to be back. Thank you, Keenan, for that introduction. I'm gonna go ahead and actually share my screen and we can get to the presentation portion. Okay, let's do this. So welcome to the second day of AI Build Week. As already mentioned, it is an actual week. So 5 days of just building and with AI, sorry, building with AI in Retool. Yesterday, we spoke a little bit about LLMs and prompts. Today, we're going to be talking about vectors. And then by the end of the week, you're going to be learning all stuff about agents. So if you're interested, definitely do go check out the link and register. Now, my name is Angelica Lavoy Torres. I'm a developer advocate here at Retool. And today, we're going to take a closer look at how to convert your data into a format that LLMs can understand and use it to get even better responses from your large language models. For a quick preview of today, we have an overview of what vectors are and how RAG works with AI apps, why prompt testing matters more than benchmark, and a walkthrough of a database power app movie search engine. Okay, sounds good? Then let's get started. I want to ground us first in some concepts responsible for powering modern AI systems today. First, we have vectors, and then we have RAG, which is retrieval-augmented generation. A very familiar concept we have of vectors is through the concept of math. Now, when we say vectors, we really mean vector embeddings. These are essentially a numeric representation of data that captures meaning and similarity in high-dimensional space. Now, some of the ones that you might know is Hugging Face, Pinecone, etc., etc. It can often be used to measure similarity, but it is also really wonderful for storage, specifically because it makes it easy to search and retrieve later. If you give it a piece of text that says, show me last month's quarter sales, a embedding model converts that text into a vector. And it looks something like this. It becomes a list of numbers representing its meaning, not just words. But let's backtrack and understand why that is powerful. In traditional database, you can only search for exact words or exact matches, but language is messy and people can often ask the same thing in many ways, like, what is the weather today? Is it sunny out? Do I need an umbrella? All these mean roughly the same thing, but the words are completely different. By converting text into vector, you can create a mathematical representation of that meaning, like that. This lets you store and search for data based on semantic similarities, not exact keywords. Why is this powerful? Well, because it provides better search. You can find relevant information even if your user questions don't match your documents exactly. It has a personalized experience. You can recommend content or actions that feel similar to the past preferences. Also, AI grounding. in RAG workflows, it lets your AI pull accurate, real company data that generates answers rather than just guessing. Now, you might have heard of the concept of unstructured data, but what does that really constitute? Well, unstructured data is information that doesn't fit neatly into rows and columns. Some examples are PDFs, Word documents, slides, email threads, Slack messages, web pages, blog posts, customer support chat, etc., etc. Now, we can't just all do SQL queries like select all word subject AI on this type of content because it isn't broken into structured fields. The benefit of storing in vectors is that you can search based on meaning, which we've spoken about. So even if your documents are hundreds of pages long, you don't have to explicitly tag or select which fields are going to be what. You can also quickly find most relevant snippets, paragraph, or document chunks without needing to pre-label everything. And you can make unstructured data queryable and actionable. There's also another word that you might have heard of, which is what is RAG? RAG is a technique that combines two strengths, is the LLM's ability to generate text and your own private or external data. Instead of asking the model to guess an answer from its training data, RAG first retrieves relevant information from a database or document store, often using the vector we're talking about. So some known ones are LangChain, Pinecone, and Llama Index. The magic here is that it delivers a context-aware answer. The benefits are, well, AI is more accurate. It grounds the answer with real, up-to-date data instead of relying purely on pre-trained knowledge. It keeps the data business-specific, and it reduces hallucinations, making less things up or incorrect answers. So like any code, we will always need to test it. And specifically, there's always going to be some, benchmarks and testing involved, right? So benchmarks are a good way to measure how good a thing is a standardized task, or specifically the thing being the model. But they don't really reflect your real business data or your information in your information documents. When you use RAG with vectors in Retool, the model's performance depends on how well it retrieves it and it uses your data. This becomes critical because your app might be pulling from support tickets or policy documents or marketing copies that, they might just be all over the place. The exact phrasing or prompts can also completely change when documents are retrieved and how the final answer is generated. Then prompt testing also helps with grounding answers rather than hallucinating. So this might seem simple, but helping your vector with a schema, a testing model, or even a different prompt, instruction like summarize concisely, always include links, or use bullet points can really impact the answer. Okay, so now we're gonna build this thing that I mentioned at the beginning, the movie search database AI vibe thing, okay? So what I'm gonna do is actually, somebody should drop a link into the drive, which is the resources that you're gonna have access to. And it's gonna be this folder here. So this document is actually for you guys to decide whether you just wanna watch me do it and then work on it later, or if this is something that you wanna copy the code as I'm working on it. Just up to you. Just make a copy of it rather than request edit, just because a lot of people are gonna be joining and gonna wanna do the same thing. So the first thing that we're being asked is to download this letterbox review. So I'm gonna show you how the actual final answer or app that I built looks like. It's a scene sense is what I call it. Much of this is just, UI, but here's, I'm actually gonna ask you guys, can you write on the chat anything you want me to ask? It kind of, based on what you learn, remember that it doesn't have to be exact words. It could just be kind of like a feeling of a type of movie that you want to watch. So I'm gonna check out the chat for a second. If nobody has anything, then I can go ahead and, okay. What is, okay, so, wait. I forgot to say. So this is only with the AMC knowledge. So anything that has to do with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay. I'm actually gonna take, no Captain America. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna write one. Okay, here's one. I'm gonna write a high school movie that is cute. Let's see how that works. And the information that I'm going to be retrieving is actually from a vector that has all the knowledge, which is this one over here. It's a document that contains all the letterbox reviews, the top 3 reviews of all of the movies in the cinematic universe. So the 36 of them, even down to like the one that came out this year. And it's going to take that information and give me a poster and a trailer. So right now I recommend the Spider-Man Homecoming, and this is the trailer for this movie. Cool. So I will do the other ones that you guys, I like one of the prompts here. So I'm gonna do this one at the end. And right now I'm gonna help you guys build it. So you're gonna download this one, the AMC Letterbox Review. And we're gonna go, and this is in my space. You should log in into your Retool like workflow, and then we're gonna go into resources. From there, we're gonna go into Retool Vectors. And then we're gonna create a new one. So a new vector. And I'm going to name this MCU. Simple. The default embedding model, there's 3 right now. I'm simply going to use the ADA, but depending on whether you have a small or large enough text file, then this can be really relevant when doing the context chunks. So I'm not going to do a filter label, and the default metadata is actually just something that you want all of the documents in this vector to have that information. So something like, I don't know, like the company name. So I can do company, oh, company, and then I can do this the, whoops, okay. And I'm gonna do a document. You can also look through URLs. You can say like which URLs you want it to look through and the URLs that you don't want it to look through. But for now, just a document is fine. I'm gonna create it. And over here, I'm gonna add the document. I'm gonna download it the same way that you guys are doing it. So just download it. And over here, a document. And as you can see, now every single document that gets added in here is going to have this metadata. The same thing if I added some filter labels, it would be an option here. But just for now, it's going to be simple like that. This is my document. Here you have it. I click on it and upload it. So I can actually look through it. And this is where the embedding that we were talking about, the ADA or the small or the large one, this is where the context chunks will look differently based on the way that it's processed. For now, this is good for me. So I'm going to be done and I'm going to start building. So I'm going to go to apps. I'm going to create an app. And what do you see over here? Well, this is mainly just UI. The most important thing here is the text input. So I'm going to go into my add UI area and I'm going to do text input. This is my inspector area. I'm just going to change this to ask me anything you want to look up. It's very long, but you can see that it changes instantly. I'm not going to do the label, but I'm rather going to do on the plus icon on the add-ons, a prefix icon, and I'm going to do search. And instead of me just having it plain like this, where I don't have a submit button, I'm going to actually add a submit button. And I'm going to name this search. This is all good to me. You can change the color and appearance and the style. I'm going to name this. Very important that you are correct about your labeling, specifically if you're going to walk through the document that I provided. So keep that in mind if you're not. And now this one, I didn't change it. Instead of text input 1, it's going to be called prompt. Cool, just like that. I can move this down to be in the middle. I could have added like an image here to add the logo, but rather I'm gonna go into my app settings and I'm gonna go into app themes. This actually is a great space where you can customize the entire look of your app. So something like, oh, I want it to be that color. I want it to be almost like this pinkish. I want the canvas to be rather this other color, and maybe not pink for that one. Okay. This seems all right, right? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is actually go into code. In code, I'm going to be creating a workflow. And this is where all of the execution of this movie search thing is going to happen in. So I'm going to do plus, I'm going to resource query, and I'm going to look up workflow. Okay. I'm going to rename this MCU knowledge. There you go. And I'm gonna, in the select workflow, I'm gonna create a new workflow. So I just press on it and it opens up a whole new tab where you are gonna be working on your workflows. And loading my workflow. Okay, I'm gonna rename this AI search engine. Cool. And I'm gonna go back to where my app is. I'm gonna select that same thing. I can actually just refresh so you see the new name is here in Code tab, MCU, AI search engine. I'm gonna leave the run until parameters as finished, and instead of raw, I'm gonna do JSON. What are we gonna do here? It's asking for a key and a value. Well, whatever my prompt is what I wanna send back to be over here. So I'm gonna delete this code because I don't need it. And as you can see, it's a start trigger. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna name this start trigger, and I'm gonna inject the answer from the prompt. So prompt dot value. How do I know if this works? Well, I can type high school movie. Then if I go over here, it should say that's the value of high school movie. Cool. Before we leave this, I think I should just attach it now. I'm gonna go into the enter button and I'm gonna go into event handlers. From there, I'm gonna do a control query and I'm gonna do MCU knowledge. So now whenever I click it, this workflow is gonna run, but nothing is there, so nothing is gonna run. I'm gonna save this and cool. I'm gonna go now into the workflow. Okay, so what I like to do, since we're gonna be building off each block from one another, I like to write my test JSON parameter right now. So as you can see, it's a curly bracket and then the rotation. So I'm gonna do start trigger, and I'm gonna do a horror film. Could just be as simple as that. I could be a lot more specific, but this is good. And I'm gonna add an AI action. This AI action, I'm gonna call it get vector info. So there you go. And I'm gonna generate a text. This is essentially what it's gonna analyze what the recommendation should be, right? I'm gonna do the start trigger data. It's not 3 curly brackets, it's just 2 curly brackets. That is good as my input. My system message is something that is already in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this and I'll break it down into what is being said here. And copy this, put it here. Okay, so this is actually a great way as we move on to agents eventually, to how are you going to give it like a specific persona? How are you going to tell it what to do and what not to do? So here's my system prompt. I'm telling it that it is an intelligent movie recommendation assistant that is primarily just going to recommend me from the MCU and the top 3 letterbox reviews. Also, I'm giving it instructions in terms of like, hey, analyze this, then look at the emotions that people are providing. So something that makes you cry, then look for parts of the words that might say, hey, that is a tear jerker, or that's very emotional or heartfelt. Whether the person's asking for something epic, then be doing like, be searching for a thrilling action or high stakes or epic battles. And then I give it actually an example of how that answer should be provided. Now, the temperature, I want this to be, it can be as creative as it wants, but for now, I want it to follow my instructions. So I want it to be very deterministic. And in here, I'm going to click the use retool vector to provide more context for my query. And I'm going to select the MCU, which is the vector that we created at the beginning. I'm not going to add anything for the filter. And this is where it's more dependent on which model you like the most, depending on their analysis. If I use this one, it could be kind of straightforward and it's very narrow in thinking complex wise in terms of people's emotions and the way that they write the prompt. So I actually like a lot DeepSeek V3. R1 is actually better, but it takes a long time. So this for now, I'm gonna click play in here and see what happens. Takes longer than something like something from OpenAI, but ultimately I do like the answer better just because it reviews everything that was in the vector. R1 is very thorough, and here we have our first answer. We have Doctor Strange in the multiverse of madness, Thunder and Love and Thunder, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and Eternals. Okay, so we're having 4. This is also where you will see based on the model, like how good are they at distinguishing and like if something is a horror, because I wouldn't call Wakanda a horror film, but it also is based on this information here, right? Maybe the reviews do call it a little bit horror-ish, or like the more information, the more context it has, the more rich it can be. So always give a lot of data so then you can have better results. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is add another AI action. This AI action is going to be called extract info. And what I want to get is the titles of the things listed here. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to extract entity from text. Okay, there you go. I'm going to input this. Using the get vector info MCU data, I'm going to extract each recommended title as a separate entity. Each movie should be shown as movie title and year. Okay, and the way that I want to extract the entity, I am going to dynamically set this. And I'm going to create an array. Since it's 36 movies, I don't think it should recommend me more than 10. So for now, I'm going to cap it at 10. And I can use the GPT-4o mini. That seems extremely good to me just because it's concise. As you can see, it has extracted the 4 titles that I was given, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is another AI action. This AI action is going to be called poster trailers. Cool. Name it here. And this one, I wanted to give me the poster URLs and the trailer URL. Okay, so generate text is good for me. The input is going to be the extract info data, which is this one over here. Something really cool about Retool is that whenever you change labels and you have already pre-attached to something, it automatically updates. So if I were to name this extract entity, ta-da, I'm going to go back to extract info though. So just consistency wise. So I'm going to go now into writing the system message. And this is what I've written. I've written, hey, take the information from here. And I want you to look up at the movie database website. That is your first choice. However, if you don't find it, then look at IMDb or look at Wikipedia. Otherwise, for the trailers, then look at YouTube. If YouTube doesn't work, then Vimeo, Apple Trailers, or IMDb. Just give me the URL as simply as this. This is the format that I want the answer to be in. And if I run this, let me see. Oh, I actually want to do, I'm going to change my model actually. I'm going to do GPT 4.1 because it has the ability to look for the latest information. So for example, I did an example where it showed like Deadpool and something that was in 2024, then it wasn't able to register it. So I'm going to run it with this one just because it's pulling from the latest information. Not that these movies are very old or anything, or recently. And there you have it. This is the format that the answers are being provided. Cool. If you're having any issues at any point, we're not there yet, but eventually when we finish where the image might not be showing or the URL is incorrect, this is the space where you will edit that. You will try to be as concise as you can be, or if you have another website that has trailers and posters that you want to pull from, then this is the message that you will edit. Now, what I want to do is extract this information as something more like an array. So I'm going to add a code, and this is going to be a JavaScript. And I am just, since I already know what the structure is going to be, because I said it what it's going to be, then I can be very precise about how I get that information out. My label for this is going to be label text. And if I run this, there you have it. You have the title, poster, trailer. Amazing. So the next thing that I want to do is send that information back because I want to be able to attach it to something that is something like this, right? I want to be able to modify this information and pull it every single time. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to add a response block. I can leave it like response 1 to 200 is fine. And this is going to have a return body of movie info. And it's going to be the label text dot data. If I run this, it should say successful and show me what it actually looks like. I can deploy this before we continue editing this in the for future iteration. I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna now add a grid view. So I'm gonna go back into the UI space and grid view. Here you have it. This is great because it doesn't matter the amount of recommendations it has, it's going to duplicate the same thing for each of the components that you see here. I'm going to connect the data to be the one from the MCU knowledge. And if I go here, this is going to be movie, Where is it? Okay, it's gonna be item.data.movie-info. So when I access the other things, I could just simply say trailer and poster, and it doesn't have to be that complex. I also want to set this up with a little bit of padding. I want to set this to hidden. I don't want to show it when there's no answers anything at the beginning. And I want to do the height as fixed. So I'm gonna change it to here. It could be auto, doesn't really matter. It's up to you, the preference. This seems good enough for me. And what I want to do now is that if I go into the component area here, this side, component tree, I have a grid view one. And if I click on it, I'm going to have a container one. And what I want to do is this is going to be my title. So I'm going to name this movie title. And the name of this is going to be, this is where you are writing the item.movie-info.title in the value space. There you have it. I'm going to add another one in the plus icon here. I'm going to add it as image. And then I'm also going to add a button. The button is going to have the option of going to another trailer. Well, going to the trailer URL. I'm going to name this movie poster. Okay. And I'm going to change the image URL. It's going to be this. Right now it's red. Just don't worry, it will work. We haven't set it up, so that's why it's showing up as red. So movie trailer. And I'm going to change the text to trailer. And I'm going to add an event handler. And this event handler is going to be go to the URL. And in going to the URL, I mean, you might know what it's already going to look like, but I'm going to inject the trailer. There you have it. Cool. So how do we know if this works or doesn't work? Well, aside from the enter button, we have attached the MCU knowledge trigger, but I want to also show the grid. So I'm going to go into control component and I'm going to do the grid view one and I'm going to do set hidden. And I'm gonna uncheck that because it's already set to hidden as a default, and this is gonna set it to visible. Okay, let's see how it works. Let's see. I'm gonna publish this in my own publish. Cool. It should change that name later, but let me see. I think somebody said something here that I liked. Okay, I'm gonna run this one that I saw that I liked. Okay, somebody wrote a movie that will make me cry a lot. I'm gonna search that. Down here, you can see the runtime of how much it's taking. This is now like based on the workflow. Each model is gonna take their time depending on how fast or how complex the reasoning is. So that is why if you want something shorter, then choose models that run on the faster side. If you want something more thorough, then just be aware that this is gonna take longer than that. Okay, ta-da! Well, we have an awkward one here, but I'm gonna fix this now. I'm gonna go back into the app and I'm gonna run the same thing. A movie that will make me cry a lot. And I'm searching it here. And the reason is that we want to modify the way that the trailers and the poster button is gonna look like. Let's give it a few seconds. I want to check in with everybody if anybody has any questions or something. Okay, yeah, if anybody has any questions or is lost at any point, I'm checking this and I can incorporate or go back to visit anything particularly. Okay, so we're seeing a couple things that are good to know. So first thing is that we want to make this auto. Or make those are too small. Okay, then let's do the grid instead as auto. Okay, let's set this to auto and then let's move. Oh, well, we know that that trailer works. Let's move this to be longer. I'm trying to fix the size of this. Okay, not like that. Sorry, I'm just trying to modify this space over here. Oh, this one. Sorry, I have to modify the first one. Okay, that is why it's showing as a small one because this one is small. Okay, so I am gonna change it like this, and there you have it. Something a little bit more reasonable. As you can see, the first one is the one that needs to be changed for the other ones to be changed. This one is now not generating a Ponko, and this one is not showing anything. So I'm gonna do another iteration of this. I'm gonna do a romantic film for a date. Ah, and let's see what the answers are. Maybe I can fix this to. It's loading. Okay, there you have it. So it should be working right now. There's a couple of hiccups as you can see of like maybe the URL is not working as well. That is where you go back to this space over here to recommend another space that they can get the URLs from, or you can even add like something like a checker of is this URL working and is producing an actual image. That would be good. Something else that I want to add, just because it's important when we're working with vectors. Vectors are not only good for retrieval information, but also, once you have the information, you want to maybe store it somewhere. So let's say that you have like a catalog, a bunch of clothing, or you have a store that you're running and you want to run an inventory. Well, sometimes the information is going to be changing because people buy it, it goes sold out and everything, right? Well, this vector can be very much looked as, I don't know, like a set of rules for a customer service support system. So if the question is this, then maybe this is the context that you should provide, right? Now, if you have something where you want to keep track of everything that is being sold out, you can also keep updating your vector or adding other documents to your vector per se. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to continue on from the workflow. And if I go back here, I'm going to add another AI action. This AI action is going to be for vectors. Well, it's not really an AI action, but yeah, there you go. And I'm going to get the document chunks. The vector is going to be the MCU one. And I want to name the document movie additional data. And what I want to do is save the poster URL and the trailer URL. So I go in here. And from there, I'm going to name this prior information. Cool. There, I want to add a code. This code, what we'll do is merge the prior information. So we're going to do an upsert. So that means that if the document is not there, then insert it. If the document is there, then update it. However, a primary thing about it is that it will automatically overwrite if you don't re-add the information that was prior there. So that's what we're doing now. We're merging the old with the new. So I'm going to call this merge. There you go. I can run this. Okay. There's nothing there because there was nothing prior. So merge. Oh, okay. And define because I don't have anything here. Okay, I'll fix that in a second. And then the last thing that we should do is an AI action. So something like this would be upsert document. Oh, it should be retool vectors. There you go. MCU. And I'm going to do the merge data. My document name is actually going to be the same one. So there you have it. Additional data. Da, 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 da. Okay. And I can name this update. Cool. This is generating an issue because there's no prior information here. So actually, I'm just going to show you how this looks and fix it in the document later. So because we're running a little bit tight on time. So if I were to show you how this workflow actually looks in action, if I go over here. If I go into resources, I go into Retool Vectors, and I go into MCU, I can see that a new document has been created. So movie additional data. And in here, it has all the prior tests that I've been running. And it has stuff from like the Spider-Man Homecoming, the Captain America, Black Widow, Doctor Strange. And it just keeps adding information, making sure that it doesn't repeat any of them. Okay, cool. I'm gonna pause in there. Just for if anybody is wanting to do it on their self, another alternative that you can do is something like this. You can add a branch here and you can do like a branch, and then you can get the prior information or get what documents are in that vector from that information. Then you see if that document has already been included rather than like create it from scratch. And if it is, then go into this area where you update it, otherwise just create the document. So I'll fix it in there and we'll see what from there how it works. But that kind of brings us to the end, unless anybody has any other things. Let me see. I'm gonna go back here. I'm gonna see if anybody has any other questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna jump into Q&A. I'm gonna stop sharing over here.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Angelique. We've been compiling some of the questions in our doc there. So go ahead and look through some of those and pick one you like. But as a reminder for other folks, yeah, if you have any questions about anything that Angelique showed in her presentation or kind of Retool AI and vectors and things and how that works in Retool in general, drop them in the chat or in the Zoom Q&A and we'll go through those. So yeah, Angelique, you have one you want to start with?
Sorry, I just pulled it up.
No worries.
Okay, give me 1 second. Can I have multiple PDFs to search in? Yes, you can only add a single PDF to the vectors in the example, but you can add as multiple PDFs as you want in the same process. And it's actually pretty good because that way you have a centralized space in the vector, let's say the MCU, and I wanted to add like one that is like here are the rules, or here's like other reviews, or here's other places. Like let's say if I were to categorize it from users review to like critics review, then you can add different vectors and then actually name them. So let me actually show you where that would be. Let me share my screen quickly. So if I go back here, actually, in the MCU knowledge, let's go into our workflow. Okay, here. There you go. I can just create a new vector, or I can add it, or if it's inside the document itself, then the document would just be there, and you just have to list one vector.
Cool. I'll maybe grab one of these while you're looking through the list. James
Mhm.
just asked, why set this up as a workflow as opposed to using an agent for this? And this is a good question and one we get pretty frequently. Ultimately, like the architecture when you're building an AI system like this is kind of something you have to figure out what's going to work best for you. The behavior that we were looking for here was a little bit more deterministic in that we were just kind of running a search, a single time. We wanted to be able to control that end-to-end experience. And that's what Angelique was doing when she laid out each of the blocks there. Whereas with an agent, and this is again a little bit of a preview for what we'll talk about on Friday, an agent will be able to kind of go through multiple iterations of searching, deciding if it thought the results were good, maybe doing another search with different parameters or things like that. And so if that's the behavior that you want, or if you have things like a bigger data set or data sets from multiple sources or stuff like that, that may be a case where an agent makes a lot more sense. And we'll look at some of those use cases on Friday. But in this case, we wanted to just kind of show, we have our vector data and we have, a pipeline that allows us to kind of look through that and push the results back into the UI we created in the app. So ultimately, it's a little bit use case specific, but yeah, you could build this in a lot of different ways. This is just the way we chose to do it today.
Yeah. That's also great to separate things out and like makes the workflow just be a little bit cleaner and your space also. I have another question here. Can I generate retool config like input buttons and triggers with AI a little like Claude, N and JSONs? Well, AI assisted apps generation and retool is coming soon. We'll be dropping a link in the chat actually for the waitlist that we have. But more broadly, early customers, we're onboarding early customers, and then we're also going to be rolling it out very soon. Let me see another one. What type of data cleanup is recommended prior to adding a PDFs or other type of documents/files to a vector database in Retool? I guess it's a little bit like user dependent or use case dependent, but keeping each PDF focused on a single topic and mostly text as opposed to being super image heavy are some general best practices to follow. Let's see.
I wanted to call out this one here real quick while we're looking through. We got a question pretty early on. Could I trigger this from an external post request via like a Slack bot, for example? So the workflow that Angelique set up, absolutely, all the workflows that you build in Retool can be triggered via webhook, which means you can use Slack or any other tool to trigger them via a post request. So that would be another option if you didn't want to have kind of the UI that we built here and trigger it via Slack instead, because that logic is separated out into a workflow. You could trigger that via Slack or any other system, Telegram, et cetera, that uses post requests for that, because workflows support using a webhook there. And that also kind of gets to another question that we had that I just wanted to cover really quickly. The question, like, really pretty early on, was why kind of separate the logic in an app plus a workflow, where you could have just created all the queries in an app. And yeah, I don't know, Angelique, if you have anything you wanted to say about kind of your specific architectural decisions there, but that was the
Yeah.
one we got.
Um, I think for me, again, it's just about keeping it clean. I started out like actually when I was building this, like building all of them in the code tab and just like having a mess of them. But then it was just harder to kind of like bridge that connection. While in workflows, it's just actually such a visual like interface. I can just like drag and drop and I make sure that it's sequential and I know what it looks like. Also, yeah, when it comes to the app, it's pretty clean. It's like it's only one thing that I have to call and the whole thing is being generated elsewhere. I can also, whenever there's issue, I can go directly there and refer it back rather than look at the every single like AI action or resource query that I've created and then go, I don't even know which one's the first one or which one is causing what to happen. I see another one in the chat actually. I have created a vector DB in Pinecone. Can I hook it? Can I hook that up? Yes, of course. As you can see in your work, like in your workspace, you have resources. I'm trying to see if I have it over here. Um, you have resources and you can connect anything. I mean, that's the whole point. You want to bring your data from everywhere, connect it here and have it be in a singular space. But that's what makes it so rich. So if you go to create new, create resources, then you have every single one of them that you can connect to. And there's a bunch of logos, and I would invite you to go and try that out. Mm,
Cool. Another one we got that we haven't covered yet, just came in from Cairo. When building the vector from a site URL, which is again something that Anjali showed, but we didn't really cover, can we set up a schedule to update that vector periodically? So, for example, if you have like a bunch of documentation that was hosted on a website and you wanted to pull that into a vector for like creating a customer support bot or something like that, your documentation is constantly being updated. So I think the question is there a way to kind of update that periodically? And that's not something that Retool Vectors supports natively, but workflows, in addition to being able to be triggered by a webhook, can be triggered on a schedule. And so, kind of like Angelique was showing at the end, where she was actually updating the vector data as part of a workflow. You could have a workflow that runs, every hour, every 12 hours, 24 hours, et cetera, and scans through all the source material and then basically decides what sort of updates to make to your vector. So that's a possibility and something that we recommend if you have data in a vector that's changing periodically.
yeah, I agree. I'm actually gonna throw you a question, which I think is pretty much part of the thing that you just answered, but thanks for the multiple PDFs question. So can I drop multiple PDFs into Google Drive and let the tool consume those dynamically?
Yeah, this is a good question, and actually something I'm working on building currently. So we have some things coming up internally to Retool, and folks are creating all sorts of content around that in various Google Docs. And we want to basically, like we have here, have a sort of chat bot or kind of basically we can get a response that sources from those Google Drive documents. And so again, you can't necessarily specify like a Google Drive or a Google Drive folder to pull data into a vector from automatically. But what I'm doing and what y'all can do as well is basically we have a workflow that looks inside a specific Google Drive folder, looks through each of the files that are in there, and then decides, okay, do we need to update the vector? Has this been updated since the last time we inserted it into the vector, et cetera? So we're able to kind of pull those results in over time. And as people change the underlying Google Docs every 12 hours, that just runs and updates the vector. So there's a little bit of a lag, and you can, again, adjust the timing of how often you run the workflow, depending on if that's important to you. But you can do a lot with workflows and like using that to automatically get data into vectors and have vectors be up to date.
Yeah, Uh, so that builds on the next question also, which I'm just going to repeat what you said. When building the vector from a site URL, can you set that up on a schedule to update the vector periodically? We don't support this natively, but you can create a workflow that requeries the URL data and updates the vector that you have already created. So again, there's a lot of power to vectors and a lot of ways to trigger them.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna grab another one of these. So some Alex said, I'm currently working on a RAG application using transcripts from company training videos. When adding to the vector search, I don't get the best results. Do you recommend adding post-processing steps to raw text transcripts? And if so, can you recommend some techniques for better vector and or semantic search results? It's an interesting question and a tough one to answer just because a lot of this stuff is kind of use case specific, and depending on how long the transcripts are, how all over the place they are, or how focused they are, it's like it's kind of something you have to experiment with yourself. So I will say that um, using something like Pinecone or another tool where you get to kind of more dials you can turn in terms of how you chunk your vectors and how all of that works might give you better or different results. So for example, if like you have a document that you're splitting up every page, right? Like those results aren't going to be able to be as specific to a given sentence versus if you're chunking that document into paragraphs or sentences before you vectorize it. So there are a lot of kind of, like I said, knobs to turn there. But really the kind of best practices that, Angelique was mentioning earlier, was that, really just kind of drop them in, experiment, and make sure your data is clean. And for the most part, more text based instead of, text and images mixed. And that starts to get kind of difficult. So in your case, it sounds like transcripts largely probably pretty text based. But things like doing some pre-processing to make sure that for each sentence in the transcript it says who the speaker was, etc. Not all tools give you that, so if you can do those sorts of pre-processing things, maybe that will get you closer to the results you're looking for.
I have another one, and you can help me with this one if anything, but what is the best way to prep data that should be consumed through Vector DB? Is it just plain text, or can we have multiple Excel tab sheets too? Well, actually, like you can upload a file that or plain text. I mean, the whole point is that you don't have to structure it. I structured my document just because I wanted to organize and be able to read it later, but no, I think that's the whole point. But Keenan, if there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think, yeah, I think that basically covers it. Again, the both interesting and frustrating thing about all of this is that it does require just quite a bit of experimentation, and like we even saw that in your presentation, right, where sometimes it returned exactly what you were looking for, sometimes it didn't, and you can spend a lot of time kind of going back and forth to get that accuracy, and depending on your use case, like how the data gets structured, there's a little bit of a experimentation angle because we're all figuring it out. But that's also why we kind of wanted to bring y'all in and let you look over all of our collective shoulders as we build this stuff. So thanks, Angelique, for participating in that.
Yeah, I have another
Yeah,
question that I can
go
ask
ahead, grab
you.
another one.
Is there a
Yep,
limit on how much data can be stored in the vector DB?
that is a good question. We do have limits on overall vector storage. So right now it looks like what I'm seeing here, and I'll want to follow up on this, so make sure to check back in the community thread for this one in particular. But it looks like we currently support 120 million embedding tokens per day. So tokens don't quite directly map to words in the English language or in any other language, but what we found is that even for folks that are running extremely busy production workflows, that's like they're not hitting those limits there. So while we do have, obviously, everything has some sort of limit on it eventually, I would be very surprised if that came into play. So yeah, I'll provide some more kind of documentation on those specifically in the community thread when we drop all of these in there. But yeah, good question.
Yeah, there's another one talking about having their own DB schemas. And the question is there a big difference between having a DB table as separate files or one large file? I think this is where the default embedding model comes into play, because it's about like how is it being consumed. So for example, for me, I thought that my document was long and I tried it out with large, and then it just wasn't. So I had to go back to something like a AD It's just a little bit of experimentation. I think it's mostly about how the context model is being consumed. And then also if you want to add any filter labels, that might also help it out.
Yeah, speaking, can you say a little bit more about the filter labels? I think we had another question here, which was, if you have a bunch of PDFs uploaded to vectors, can you like restrict your search basically to just like search for a couple for a particular, like if you know your search needs to be focused in only one or two areas, but you have a vector of a bunch of different PDFs, and that's where the filters and labels come into play. So can you talk a little bit more about that or kind of how you might use that? I know you did some of the metadata stuff in your presentation.
Yeah, I'm actually there's a space that I'm thinking about right now that actually does that. So there's two ways about it. You can either, as you're giving it or uploading a new file, or even making the vector, you can add filter labels, and these will really help out with your vector sources. So when you make them, it can just like easily identify sections that it like recognizes, and then just kind of like include them or not include them. And I think that is, I'm looking it up like where specifically it is because it actually does exist when you're doing the retool vector. I think it is, oh, over here. I can share my screen quickly.
Cool.
So right here, when you say like use retool vector, then you would say like choose, there's nothing because I haven't added anything, but this is where you would like filter specifically. See? It limits the vector search to documents with the selected tag. If no tag is provided, then all document will be searched.
Yeah, and so basically what that allows you to do, like you was just saying, is kind of tag documents as certain types. And so then you could say, for example, if you had the kind of review document that we uploaded for the MCU, if you also had those for, animated Disney movies or all the Mission Impossible movies or whatever, you could say, okay, cool. I want this search to be only restricted to Mission Impossible movies. And then you could use that tag to include only the Mission Impossible movies. And then even though there's other data in your vector, you would not have that included. So lots of ways to kind of, again, knobs to turn and things to mess with if you need to get a little bit more specific here. Cool. I'm gonna grab one of these. I created a chatbot for my course that references the syllabus and the assignment information to find answers for students. The prompt is a bit long and the text file is also fairly large. And I realized when I moved to my own API that I'm over the limit for my type of account. How can I make it more efficient? And can you point me in the right direction? So if I'm understanding this correctly, it sounds to me like you are kind of having it, you have a prompt that's quite detailed, but then you're also including like the full syllabus and things in the message to the chatbot as well. And this actually does seem like a pretty good use case for vectors. So a lot of the time when you want to use vectors, the kind of very like basic naive approach is just put all the data in the prompt and the AI will do its best to handle that. When you start to run into context window limits, that's when using vectors really comes in handy because actually what's happening behind the scenes is if you have your syllabus kind of in a vector, for example, your AI query will be able to pull only like the relevant pieces out of that syllabus to add context to send to the large language model. So that means you're not including the entire syllabus in the prompt every time, et cetera. And so this again, it helps you cut down your prompts length, but make sure that the most relevant data that will actually help the large language model be better and more specific to your use case is always included. So I might recommend that, yeah, you add kind of the syllabus and any course supporting course documents to a vector. And then that checkbox that Angelique showed that just said, use retool vectors to add context to my query. You check that and pick the vector where you've added that course data. And then you're not sending all of the course data every single time you call the large language model. But Retool will help you kind of smartly include the relevant pieces from the syllabus, et cetera.
Yeah. Um,
Cool.
that's a great one. I have another one that says, how frequently should we update? I'm trying something real time or near real time updates, such as live news feeds or live sports commentary. I think that's basically like where the second part of what I showed about the um, like upsert and everything will come into play. Like I added into the singular workflow, but you can make many different types of workflow that keep track of this. So whenever like I'm gonna use the information of like, let's say that you notice that something has been updated, and if you want to keep track of that, then like that's when you would use something like inserted into your vector. But if you see that the information is still old or like hasn't changed, then look at that document rather than like keep searching every single time. But yeah.
Cool. We've got one from Alex here about the grabbing data from an API, vectorizing it, and then using it in a workflow. It's kind of a variation on what we already covered, but basically, yeah, you can use Retool workflows to query that data from the API. You can kind of programmatically, like Angelique was showing with a couple of first steps there, basically like turn that into a vector in a workflow as opposed to doing the drag and drop PDF via the interface there. So you can absolutely do all of that inside of a workflow. And that is a pretty common use case for, like we mentioned, pulling a bunch of stuff from Google Drive that people may be updating, et cetera. Yeah, so that's definitely doable. Let's see.
There's
Angelique,
another,
you want to take this one about the using vectors to document a large code base? That seems like a very nuanced and in-depth question.
I don't think I see it. I was going to ask you a new question, actually.
Okay, well, we'll do this one real quick. So at the very top, we've got one where we have an idea where I'm going to try to get an AI to document a large code base. I would like to be able to use a Slack bot to respond to client requests and use it, use Markdown files to create tickets like with context from the code base. Is this a use case for vectors? I think this is a bit of a complicated question. Yes, it is a use case for vectors. You'll see all of these various like coding editor startups, Cursor and Windsurf and others handle this problem slightly differently. But they are, entire companies basically dedicated to handling this problem. So depending on the size of your code base and how complex like your files and dependencies and things are, this may be something you would be able to accomplish yourself using vectors in that way. There are also tools that I've seen if your code base is not super large to basically it compacts your entire code base into a single markdown file that tells the LLM about the architecture, the specific files, the contents of those files, etc. And that can be useful for this kind of like vector search through a code base. But yeah, any code base that is medium to large size, this very quickly becomes a very difficult problem, which is why there are entire companies that are trying to solve this. So yeah, of course, like recommend that you experiment and try it out, but there will be probably quite a bit of experimentation there, in my opinion.
I think this is going to be our last question.
Sure.
We can double tag this one, but if a client has a pricing catalog in a Google Sheet or a CRM accessible via API, would I need to add this information in the vector, or would it be better to just query this data in a workflow? Well, I guess it's dependent. I've seen all the use cases. I've seen the use case where, for example, if it were like an AI answering to your customers, then like having it in a vector where it can access it and you know that that is not going to change. Well, then yeah, have it there and like have it be static and have it like retrieve that information to make the experience a little bit better. Now, if your pricing is constantly changing, then unless you create a certain type of workflow that makes space for that, then I guess it's a matter of static versus not static.
Yeah, and it also depends on where the data is stored as well. So, for example, um, large language models are quite good at writing Salesforce queries, for example, right? So we have a lot of cases where, okay, we need to get some data out of Salesforce. We could like export the data from Salesforce, put it in a vector, like then call it. But like Angelique mentioned, that data is constantly changing. And also, there's just way too much for the AI to be able to pull it out of a vector consistently. So what we do in that case is basically we say, okay, cool. Here is our Salesforce schema. Here are all our custom fields. Here's how our data is set up. Please like write the query. And that's not even necessarily a vector thing. We can just put all of that in a prompt and say, okay, write the Salesforce query. And then we have another workflow block that actually runs the Salesforce query. And so if you have kind of a CRM that the large language models know about, you could potentially go that route as well and just use the AI to dynamically write the queries for you and then run those queries in a more like programmatic way. So I know a lot of our answers have kind of been it depends, or we need to experiment and find out for yourself. And I'm sure that's frustrating, but that's just kind of the reality of it. Is a lot of these situations are pretty unique, and it just depends. I can't really say okay, here's the line where like you have too much CRM data to include it in your prompt or in a vector. But you'll just find that if you try to do that, the AI won't be able to pull out of the vectors as consistently or correctly as you would hope. And that's where you would need to experiment with a slightly different approach of maybe having it live in the system of record wherever that is, if it's Salesforce or something else, and have your AI just help you write those queries for those systems. So
Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. This was really wonderful. Also, if you have any sort of questions, drop them in the community. This whole thing is going to be posted there. The resources are there for you, like the templates that I've made. And then, yeah, resources wise, we have our YouTube channel, which we're constantly updating with new content, as well as Retool University. So if you're kind of like, I don't know much about JavaScript or even like SQL or APIs, then we have courses dedicated to that to help you get started, as well as like if you want something more a little bit more advanced, then there is tracks for you. And then also the community is always there to, support one another. So if anybody had any questions and you're kind of like new or more of an expert, so the symbiotic relationship. So yeah, thank you so much. I hope that you guys stick around for the rest of the week. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, y'all.